Okay, so I just want to do kind of a close-up on writing a primary key and writing a foreign key constraint. They are both constraints. So I've got a constraint here. This is PK employee, which is the name of the table where this constraint resides. This constraint resides in the employee table. All right, and then our naming convention says that we also tell it which field we're going to use in our name as well, which field we're going to use as the primary key. This is just a naming convention. It doesn't actually have any effect on functionality. It has an effect on how we can react to errors that occur because of this primary key constraint issue. So we can go primary key and employee number, and we're done writing this out because we've named our constraint and we've defined our constraint. Primary key, all it needs is to know that it is a primary key and what field it belongs on. Okay, we want to add another constraint now. We want to add a foreign key constraint, but first we need the column to hold it, right? So each employee belongs in a department. So we're going to put a department code in here, and our department codes are 4 characters long in the other table, all right? And typically you want to make sure that your employees all belong to a department at all times. So we want to say that they're not allowed to leave a blank department code. So it's not null. That's a required field. Our foreign key is almost always going to be required. So that's kind of a rule of thumb, unless you think about, maybe adding a child field and waiting until we find out what it belongs to afterwards. For example, we hire an employee, but we don't know what department we're putting them in yet, but we do want them in our database. Our business rules would state that we allowed nulls. For our purposes, we're not allowing nulls, so that we always have a matching department for each employee. Now, in addition to having the column, this is just the column which holds our foreign key value. We have to make sure that that column has valid data. I'm going to just pin this off to the side until we're finished here. And that means that we have to put another constraint on it. And this is something that the database will watch. As we are entering data into our database, it will double check that we're following our constraint rules and not allow us to insert data that doesn't follow the constraint. So that's what that's there for. We write a foreign key kind of like we do a primary key constraint. Our naming convention starts with fk underscore employee underscore, and then after the second underscore this time, the thing we change about a foreign key, our naming convention says that we talk about or we describe which table that our foreign key will be referring to. But again, this is a naming convention. I can call this, well, I can't use the semicolons, but you get the idea. I can just put whatever I want in there. The name does not affect the functionality. It does affect our ability to read errors related to the functionality and be able to narrow it down to where that error came from. Constraints, no two constraints can have the same name in the whole database. So I can't have PK employee number in an employee table and also in a department table. They have to be unique throughout the whole database. So the naming convention, using a prefix that starts with our current table name, ensures that uniqueness. Okay, so a foreign key constraint continues on by saying foreign key. We have to describe which field in this table that this foreign key constraint will filter for us. So foreign key constraint constrains our department code so that it will always reference, okay, so we follow with this references keyword, the department table's department code. Right? So our constraint constrains, when it's a foreign key, constrains the department code to say that it can only contain values that reference the department table's department code. So our child table's column, that one right there, can only reference our parent table's primary key. So if we think back to our department table, our primary key is the department code. Right? So that's how our foreign keys work. That way we always have an employee belonging to a correct department, and an employee cannot belong to some made up department code that doesn't exist.